when you see all that is wrong in this world, it can be disheartening. But it's important to remember that the reason why we fight as activists, as Uyghurs, is for those personal stories. We understand the impact that it has on ourselves and on others. And we understand that there is an impact that we can have, even today. While action is slow, action is being taken. And we're seeing today the international community rising up and opening its eyes to the crisis at hand.
Hello, everyone. My name is Julie Millsap, and I'm the Public Affairs and Advocacy Director at Campaign for Uyghurs. I can remember as a child how strangely impactful and indeed intriguing I found it to study the Holocaust and even the Rwandan genocide. Like many young people, at first it really seemed unfathomable to me that human beings could commit these types of evil. And I always wondered from a young age, why didn't more people stop these things from happening? Several years later, I had a conversation with a friend's grandmother who was a former member of the Hitler Youth. It all put it into greater perspective. I remember very clearly that she said to me, we were swept up in patriotism, our false version of it, and we stupidly believed that we possessed true love for our country and our people. We were ignorant and misled. Fast forward to the present time. As I work with an NGO that is working to stop active genocide, I am left sometimes asking the same questions again. How is it that people can commit such evil, and why aren't more people stopping it? For those who may be unfamiliar with the situation at present, in the land called East Turkestan, which is profaned as Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region by the Chinese regime oppressing the Uyghurs, active genocide is occurring. Millions of people are detained in modern-day concentration camps based on their ethnicity alone, while they're used as slaves in factories, producing goods for many products that we all know and love and consume quite widely, and facing physical, mental, and sexual torture of the most imaginable, horrific natures. Children are being stripped away from their parents, taken to state-run orphanages, to being brainwashed into praising the Chinese Communist Party and its leader Xi Jinping, while the Chinese state strives to define patriotism as blind worship of the party. Any people who have distinct cultural identity or thoughts are being targeted, and the Uyghur homeland, rich in natural resources, makes the Uyghurs a natural target for this neo-fascist Orwellian international criminal organization known as the CCP. To hear the intent and the intense dehumanization behind these atrocities, we need only listen to what Chinese authorities themselves have said. A religious affairs official stated of the Uyghurs, break their lineage, break their roots, break their connections, and break their origins. Completely shovel up the roots of these two-faced people, dig them out, and vow to fight these two-faced people until the end. The acts of state violence against innocent people that we see being carried out in modern day China are made more brutal by the hesitance of the international community to recognize the existence of evil in China today. Choosing basic humanity over the CCP's blood money is a sadly uncommon choice at present. In the absence of the integrity that our human spirits demand, how should we respond? How can we counter this intense dehumanization, and what does it mean to commemorate genocide when it is ongoing? At Campaign for Uyghurs, we believe it's very important to allow people to see beyond statistics that they might hear in news stories, and rather to hear the personal stories and to see the faces, indeed look into the eyes of those who are being affected by one of the largest human rights crises of the modern age. We must not push their stories away or allow these people to be separated from us by borders, nationality, or ethnicity. Our world at present is interconnected, and crimes against humanity are indeed the concern of all humanity. Today, I'm very pleased that we will be able to hear from those who are missing loved ones, from those who have made the active choice to be the upstanders that this moment in history requires. With that, it is my honor to read a statement on behalf of one of the brave Uyghur individuals that I am very privileged to call my friend, Ms. Ziba Murat. I met Ziba about a year ago when I became involved with Uyghur advocacy work. Her fight to free her mother, who has been abducted by the Chinese regime, is painful to watch, to be quite frank. Emotionally draining indeed, to see how much pain human beings are being forced to endure. And yet, her consistent desire to seek to free her mother, who's been swept up in this genocide, inspires me on a daily basis. She was unable to join us this evening, but I am very privileged to be able to read her remarks. She writes, I once had the privilege of speaking at an event with Rabbi Wittenberg in the UK, whose grandfather was interned during the Holocaust. He told me that he was deeply touched and moved by my testimony. You remind me of family letters from after the war where my family were looking for loved ones, longed to hear their voice and could not find them, he said. I want to say on behalf of my people, on behalf of the Jewish people in the best way we can, that you are not alone and that participating here, speaking, or indeed listening is a responsibility to care and to commit to caring for you and for your people. Ziba continues and says, I can't tell you how much this solidarity has meant to me, but I also am pained that the painful parts of history are repeating. I would never have believed a few years ago that my own life would be destined for this lonely path. My mother, she writes, Dr. Gulshan Abbas, a retired medical doctor, has been missing since September of 2018. Coming up on another painful Mother's Day without her, it also seems strange to be speaking her name in conjunction with genocide remembrance. Why is a retired medical doctor who faithfully serves society swept up in active genocide? The reality of the reasons that I've been unable to hear my mom's voice or let her see her granddaughters for more than 2 years now is that my mother is Uyghur. She was punished for her ethnic identity and for her family's choice to speak out against the horrors facing the Uyghur people. My mother, she writes, disappeared 6 days after my aunt spoke publicly about the concentration camps where millions of Uyghurs are being detained. Dehumanization is happening before our eyes while we're silenced by those who think our pain shouldn't be prioritized. This has been a nightmare I wish I could wake up from. My sister and I both have small children. Since the day that my mom disappeared, instead of focusing on raising our kids, we looked for our mother. We sought answers about her whereabouts and what had happened to her. I never could have imagined this lonely and painful path for myself. We have been tormented by the lack of news and inability to hear her voice. All we want for her is to be there, to give us guidance, be a part of raising our kids, the normal human experience. But she was taken away from us. They are depriving people of their families and their happiness. Ziba continues, my mother's case is one very visible example of the reality of what is happening to the Uyghur people. If someone like my mother can be taken so unrepentantly, then no one is safe. This is an issue that affects people of many countries all over the world. Many of my peers have parents who are scholars, intellectuals, and professionals, and they have disappeared all the same. The impact on our community, mentally and physically, is devastating. My mother returned to China from her last visit to the United States willingly, even though we had heard that things were starting to get bad. She went back with good faith that she had done nothing wrong. She thought being a good person and a good member of society would keep her safe. Any normal civilian should be able to have that type of faith in their society, but this is not the reality for us at present. What I want more than anything in life is to simply be allowed to hug my mother again. I want her to see her grandchildren grow up. I am one of millions of others who have no such opportunity to speak on a panel and are suffering silently. I ask you today, please join us in taking actions to stop the hurt. So those were the remarks that Ziba wanted to share with us today. And I'm holding here in my hand a picture of her mother, Dr. Gulshan Abbas, who, as she mentioned, has been missing since September of 2018, abducted by the Chinese regime. Just as she said in her remarks, this is not an isolated case. These are not isolated incidents. This is something that every single Uyghur in diaspora is facing, having at least one family member, and that would be uncommon, who's affected by this. We are going to hear from a few other individuals this evening. I'm very privileged to introduce our next speaker, who is also going to share her personal experience of seeking her missing mother, who has also been swept up in this genocide. So Akida Palat is a very inspiring figure and one of our dear beloved team members here at Campaign for Uyghurs as well. It's my honor to introduce her to share with us this evening from her personal experience. Akida.
Thank you all for joining today's event to hear the atrocity of the Chinese government and hear the tragedy of the Uyghurs. We are here to share our stories and seek help from all of the people around the world. On 2019 summers, I became an activist, not because of hate or not because I wanted to do something different, because of love, because of the love I have for my family member. So as you already know, or you probably know, the Chinese government is committing genocide. They are detaining millions of peoples. The reason I became an activist in 2019 August is my mother is the victims of the Uyghur genocide. She is one of the millions of Uyghurs that the Chinese government has detained. My mother's Rahila Dawood, she disappeared in 2017 December 12. She was detained and I haven't heard from her until now. She was not just being detained for 1 week, 1 month. She has been detained for more than 3 years. A quick introduction of my mother's Rahila Dawood. She's a professor at Xinjiang University. She's an international scholar and she used to visit many institutions such as University of Berkeley, University of Pennsylvania, University of Washington. She dedicated all of her life to research on and preserving the Uyghur cultures. Aside from her busy work, she's also a very responsible and a lovely mother's wife, daughters, and friends. The detentions of my mothers make me realize the atrocity of the Chinese government. My entire family used to follow all of the guidelines of the CCP and we be a good persons. We never do something or say some things against the governments. But the people like my mothers, who have no threat to the Chinese society, who have no threat to the Chinese government, who only try to do good things, was detained by the Chinese government. So the only explanations of this tragedy is Chinese governments wanted to destroy us. My mother, she contributed to the Chinese government for more than 30 years in her positions, but now she ended up in a place where there is no hug, no food that she loves, no the friends or relatives around her, no fresh airs, and no the chance to say hi to her daughter. So I became an activist in 2019 August, and I tried to raise awareness of my mother's case, and I tried to let the world know that the Chinese government is detaining my mothers. Until this year, I realized this is not only the case of my mother, it's the case of millions of Uyghurs. So I joined the campaign for Uyghurs to better raise awareness of my peoples. Today, I ask you a favors. You don't have to like us to dedicate all of our life, all of our time to working on this cause. Please just spare a few minutes or any time frame you can to spread the word, to try to do something, even a small petitions or shares on the social media, or tell your friends what's going on. And if you're government officials who happens to watch this video right now, please fulfill your duty to stop the genocide. The Chinese government has been denying about the fact that they are detaining millions of Uyghurs. And the followers of the Chinese government also denying the fact, saying that more than like the detentions of more than 3 million people are fixed. But I believe that you already see the statistics, data reports about where the 3 million figures can be coming from. Today, I wanted to just talk about from a ordinary Uyghur perspective. I am just an ordinary Uyghur. As you see, my family members never involved in any politics, but my mother is being detained. My uncle-in-law is being detained. The husbands of my grandmother's sisters is being detained. One of my distant relatives recently appeared on the Global Times, the Chinese government's propaganda videos, portrayed as a separatist. The only thing he do is follow the government's guidelines and write textbooks, and later on being accused by the Chinese government of spreading the separatism idea. So me and ordinary people, there are 4 or 5 people are being detained in my family. So you can just figure out the numbers. We all Uyghurs are living in this pain. So please help. So please join this journey to stop the genocide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Akita, for sharing your story with us. We are now going to hear from another individual who has been facing a similar struggle. Jolan Jimenez is with us here today to share about his experience and his fight to free his mother, Suriye Tursun. Jolan lives in Turkey and has been instrumental in using his voice to speak out both for his own family and for millions of others who are facing this extrajudicial detention and genocide by the Chinese regime. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Jolan. Jolan, please go ahead.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, everyone, for giving me this chance for voicing my mother's voice. My name is Jolan Jimenez. I was born and grew up in Sudunton, Korgos County of Ili-Kazakh Prefecture of East Turkestan. I come to Turkey for my education in 2011, and I enrolled Istanbul Commerce University in 2012. And then I graduated from Istanbul Commerce University Law Faculty in 2018 June. This is my mother, Suriye Tursun. She is 56 years old, and she was an accountant, and she was working for government as a civil servant more than 30 years. But today, my mother in the concentration camp just because of I'm studying in Turkey, and my mother who came to Turkey for visiting me and my school. In 2018 January, I have lost in touch with her, and actually I have lost in touch with all my family member. In 2018 January, they have deleted me from their WeChat account, and then. During that time, I worried that my contact with them might bring them a trouble, so I did not dare to contact them in order to protect them. The last time I heard my mother's voice was in January of 2018. She told me, dear son, study well and graduate with good grade, and I know that you are very smart, and also please take good care of yourself. Please use a moisturizer for your face, as it is getting dry and you look old. I always want to see your bright face, as I miss you so much, my son. This is my last time hearing my mother's voice, and this is the last message from my mother. And then I haven't hearing her voice, and I haven't contacted with my family really. And then, but later, after the 2 years from my lost in touch with my family, after the 2 years, I got news about my family. It told me all my family members were detained to the concentration camp. The reason was their detainment is I'm studying in Turkey. And then in 2019, December, my father and my little brother were released, and my father get gravely ill. And then my mother sentenced to 5-year jail. The reason is my studying Turkey, and my mother came to Turkey for visiting me in the Turkey. When I hearing this calamity, and then I trying to contact with the Chinese consulate, let them helping me contacting with my family, let them helping me get the info about my family, but I'm lost because when I went to the Chinese consulate, they haven't allowed me go inside and then asking them to my family members. So I just beginning to speaking out in last year 2012 January. I beginning to speaking out from my social media and in the different way to speaking out what happened on my family. After the 2 months from my first contacting with Chinese consulate in December 2019, the Chinese diplomat called me. Actually, in February 2020, they called me and then they beginning to threaten me, and the Chinese diplomat said, my father and my brother, they are outside now, but they don't want to contacting with me. They refuse to contact them with me because they said that because I have some connection with anti-China organization when I was in Egypt, and then when I in Istanbul. I asking them what kind of contacting, what kind of anti-China organization I have contacted, because I never been to the Egypt. And then the Chinese diplomat said they couldn't provide me any proof about my contacting with anti-China organization. This is lie. This is lie because I never been to the Egypt. In the Turkey, I just studying my school and then doing my job. I never have any contacting with any organization, any political organization, but they are liar. They are liar. They just don't want to give me any info about my family. So after that, I beginning to do my activity in the different way, and then I beginning to contacting me with international organization and human rights organization. Let them helping me to save my mother, but still muted. Still, I couldn't get any helping from them. I couldn't get any info about my family. In the 1st June, of 2020, the Chinese police first my father called me. Actually, this is the first time my father called me. And of course, this is the last time my father called me from I lost contacting with them. Actually, my father called me not our conversation not like normally and son and dad conversation. Actually, my father beginning to campaign me and then trying to stop me to saving my mother, stop me to my campaigning for saving my mother. And then my brother turned to take the phone and beginning to speaking with me, but the same. He also trying to stop me to doing my campaign for saving my mother. And then also my uncle turned to get the phone in that time. Also, he is trying to stop me for saving my mother. But I'm non-stop. I'm not stop. I just keeping my fighting for saving my mother, keeping my fighting for get my mother's free. I'm non-stop. I just want to ask international organization. I just want to ask. I beg international organization. I beg international human rights organization, international democracy country. I beg to. Asking them, helping me save my mother, asking them, helping millions of Uyghur people. This is not only happening in my family. Actually, this is happening in the millions of Uyghurs family. I beg international country, I beg world helping me and helping Uyghur people, standing with the Uyghur people, helping me save my mother, Surya Tursun. Thank you.
Thank you, Jolan, for sharing those very powerful and moving remarks with us. For our next speaker this evening, we're going to transition into a time where we look at what we are fighting for and things that are worth preserving. So in the midst of this act of genocide, what can we be doing to preserve? And so it is my great pleasure to introduce this evening Ms. Sonia Emin. Sonia is a Uyghur American multidisciplinary artist, writer, and scholar, and we're very excited to hear what she has to share with us this evening. So Sonia, if you're ready, you can go ahead.
Sure. First of all, I want to thank the testimonies of everyone who shared before me and the courage that that takes. It's really a heartbreaking reality that every Uyghur person in diaspora is collectively experiencing the trauma of exile and survival under genocide. And I think within that scope of genocide, it's important to remember what it is that we're connected to. And in my graduate research, I was a researcher of material culture and cultural aesthetics. And so I'm very aware that this genocide is shaping Uyghur history as we speak. In 2018, I had the privilege to interview Uyghur women in diaspora about the ways that they were experiencing and expressing their cultural identities. And this was around the time that many of our friends and families had begun to disappear and rumors of the camps had started to begin. And so I was really able to hear firsthand how so many of these women were processing and experiencing all these identity negotiations in the face of unprecedented suffering. And was really able to witness exactly what it was that they were holding on to in order to preserve a sense of agency and dignity when there were a lot of causes to lose hope. And so many of them talked about how certain cultural practices that they once took for granted in the homeland suddenly took on an amplified meaning. Many of these practices and attitudes showed up in both internal but also external ways. And for those of us, like everyone on this call, who are privileged enough to be protected from these atrocities, just by the nature of where we live, simple things like being able to eat our own food, speak our own language, listen to our own music, practice our own religion, surrounding ourselves with cultural objects, all of these things take on so much more weight, especially knowing that so many of our loved ones might be punished for participating in these very same actions. In my conversations with these women and in my research, time and time again, they talked about the importance of storytelling and of being able to surround yourself with your community, of being able to engage with your cultural practices and surrounding yourself with things that remind you of home. Being able to do this is not just a cultural preservation practice, but it's also essential for our mental health. And it's essential to be able to mark exactly this moment in cultural history. And already there are different cultural projects that are being started by Uyghurs in diaspora. There are language schools being started, several podcasts, online cultural events, creative arts projects. All of these projects that are happening within the Uyghur community hold a really strong power to mark this moment in Uyghur history for future generations, to honor the memory of those who have suffered and perished in this tragedy, and are also methods of awareness building and advocacy towards Uyghur justice, and is a way for us to build community and to center our own voices and narratives as we continue to resist the efforts to silence us. These practices are not just essential to be connected to our culture and diaspora, but this is a very clear resistance as well as resilience in the face of a genocide that is wanting to erase us. So being able to hold space for suffering, for storytelling, for creative expression, for the multiplicities of experiences within our own community is one of the most powerful actions that we can take to center Uyghur voices and experiences. And we have to continue to center the stories of what has happened, to protect the survivors, and to hold memory of our collective loss long after this tragedy has ended. And I think that's one of the reasons why this space that we're holding right now together is so essential. Because all of these, even if these parents that those who have spoken before me are calling to be released, even if they are able to be returned, the impact of this loss, the impact of this tragedy is something that we can't forget. And this is a practice that other communities are engaging in, especially like we can see with this specific event with Together We Remember and with the Holocaust. There are things that we can learn from other communities in order to be able to transmute something, to transmute trauma into meaning, and to remain connected to our resilience, because even as a people who are undergoing suffering and loss, at the end of the day, the Uyghur people, all of us are so resilient, and all of us are showing up with so much strength and power and fighting for justice. Nobody wants to be able to have to experience and go through these things that we're going through right now. But every Uyghur person that I know has shown up for this, has engaged in the labor that it takes to stay connected, to say no to these efforts of eradication, to advocate for their loved ones, to remain connected to these things that the CCP is trying to eradicate. And I think it's really important that we honor that labor, that we signify the meaning of what that takes, and that this is something that we're holding not just for ourselves, but for all of the future generations as well. So thank you for holding this space today.
Thank you so much, Sonia. That was very beautifully said, incredibly impactful. I'd like to move into introducing someone who is a great ally, friend, and inspirational figure herself. One of the people that I spoke of in my opening remarks, who has chosen to be one of the upstanders that this moment in time requires. Zainab is a student activist working with Free Uyghur Now. They are doing incredible work advocating for the Uyghur people, and we have invited her to share about her experience this evening. I'm very excited to hear from her. So Zainab, over to you.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you for everyone, Jolan, Akita, and Sonia, for sharing your testimonies, for sharing your stories. It is very impactful and very moving. And for Uyghur Now Student Coalition, we are comprised of students from university campuses across the US and around the world advocating for the rights and freedom of the Uyghur people and Turkic peoples in East Turkestan through social media advocacy, legislative action, public relations, and student outreach. Our campaign is focused on raising awareness about the genocide committed by China, amplifying Uyghur voices and stories, and condemning global brands' use of forced labor from East Turkestan. One of our main priorities and purpose for this coalition is to provide a platform for Uyghur voices where they are able to be protected and amplified. In our social media, we have been able to create infographics that provide information and educational resources on what is happening of the genocide and the crackdown that is happening in East Turkestan, highlighting the struggle of the Uyghur people and people of East Turkestan. We are also able to provide company callouts through our social media, condemn global brands involved in forced Uyghur labor as identified in the ASPI report. Moreover, and most importantly, we also within our social media provide a platform for Uyghur voices where they're able to be amplified and protected, as well as display the beautiful culture of Uyghur culture, as well as cultural awareness of people who may not be within the community have an awareness of the beautiful culture of Uyghurs and understand that Uyghur individuals are not necessarily Chinese. They have their own culture, they have their own ethnicity, and is quite beautiful and unique. In our political, we have direct legislative agendas, international advocacy, and political coalition building. One of our main purposes is that we lobby for various legislations that we feel are highly impactful for this cause. That being the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, we have been supporting efforts. We have been lobbying with other congressional representatives and senators, along with Campaign for Uyghurs, UHRP, Uyghur Human Rights as well, in initiative and legislative initiatives. Another impactful legislation that we thought it is highly impactful on lobbying for is the HR 1630. This legislation is meant to help protect Uyghur refugees and asylum seekers by designating them as priority 2 refugees. Not only, these are just two of the many legislations that are happening in the US and that have been introduced and are currently going through the processes of being passed and also being implemented as law in the US. In addition to US laws and legislation, we also advocate and lobby in a coordinated effort with international legislations around the world. We have coordinated with our colleagues in the UK, in Canada, in Netherlands and Belgium, where there have been, and also Australia, where there have been legislations that's been introduced or currently in the talks of being introduced, whether it be for the recognition of the Uyghur genocide on the government level, or have implementing legislation that have their governments cut ties and relationships with companies that are complicit with Uyghur forced labor, as well as pressuring China to end the mass atrocities that are occurring in East Turkestan and other countries and other regions in China as well. In our corporate accountability, we hold companies accountable to corporate due diligence policies. We have public call-outs, condemn implicated companies on social media platforms, researching and displaying companies' involvement in forced Uyghur labor. In addition, we have corporate outreach, where we connect with company representatives to assess integrity of global supply chains and current efforts to end the use of forced labor. In addition, we also provide and organize demonstration actions to denounce involvement of companies in the exploitation of the Uyghur people and innocent people of East Turkestan. In one of our most important perspectives is that our student advocacy. In this, we focus on empowering and uplifting student voices, especially those that are Uyghur voices, to place of power and influence. One of our main goals is to provide a safe platform for Uyghur voices, especially in universities. As university students, our coalition is comprised of mainly students and university students as well. And that is why we have seen, as we advocate, we have seen a severe lack of genuine support for Uyghur students, for Uyghur individuals in university campuses, where there has been allowance and acceptance and tolerance of outside actors like the CCP and certain institutions, even within universities like Confucius institutions, to perpetrate certain propaganda materials and information that negate as well as discredit the Uyghur genocide. This is quite harmful to the advocacy that is happening and quite harmful for Uyghur individuals to speak out. And we have seen in various incidents where students, as well as who are Uyghur, who are American, who are of all backgrounds, who advocate for the Uyghur cause, who advocate for other causes, have been harassed, have been coerced into silence. And that is one of the many reasons why we have student advocacy to combat these issues, to combat these challenges, to protect students who are in our universities. We do this by providing student toolkits that create literature guides, presentations, flyers that can be spread among student groups to educate students on the Uyghur genocide. Moreover, we have also implemented student government resolutions. These student government resolutions provide that genuine systemic support that is needed to protect Uyghur individuals, not only protect Uyghur individuals, but also initiate and provide that legacy to end the complicity of universities in genocides, not only in the Uyghur genocide, but also other genocides as well as happening around the world, as well as other mass atrocities, to begin this action and this history of protecting students rather than their own profits. We have also, within these resolutions, we have also mentioned that our universities should end their complicity in the genocide, whether it be holding shares in corporations like Zara, like Nike, who are complicit in the Uyghur genocide, as well as cut their ties with the CCP in engaging in certain activities or certain endowments or money in research, etc., that is quite harmful for the Uyghur genocide and that are harmful to the students to Uyghur students who are in their universities. Students and anyone and every individual should have the right to feel safe in their universities. They should not feel that they have to second guess their university, whether if they'll protect them or not. It is a right that the university is responsible for the protection of their students, and we will make sure that that happens and that is satisfied. That is for our student advocacy, and thank you very much for everyone for allowing us to stay here, and thank you, and we hope you have a wonderful night.
Thank you so much, Zainab, for sharing about the work that Free Uyghur Now does and what you're doing to take tangible actions to be upstanders. We can certainly attest at Campaign for Uyghurs, there's a lot that each one of us can be doing, especially as unfortunately many Western countries are directly complicit in this genocide that's happening. So it is an issue that concerns all of us. And it's really inspiring to see so many young people taking up this call to address what's happening. I'd like to now introduce our program director at Campaign for Uyghurs, Babur. He's going to share some of his personal story as well as about the work. So without further ado, Babur, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Julie. If all our participants would like to turn their cameras on for the candle lighting. We've heard a lot of stories today about the impact that the Uyghur genocide has had on people. And in a way, this is a representation, a symbolic gesture towards how we feel in solidarity with each other and with other groups around the world about coming together as a community and standing strong and fighting back for our culture, identity, and people. It is hard to see, but it is lit and it is on my computer. I know we've heard a lot of personal stories, and I just wanted to take a few minutes to share mine as well. Like Akida said, I am also just a regular Uyghur. I hadn't planned on becoming an activist. I hadn't planned on becoming an advocate or joining Campaign for Uyghurs. Circumstances called for this. My grandfather, Nur Mehmet Tohte, was an Uyghur intellectual and author. And in 2017, when we were unable to contact our family and when we were unable to hear about their well-being or see what was happening, we had only the reports that Uyghurs were being imprisoned en masse, that Uyghurs were being detained, that no travel was allowed in or out, and we lost all contact. Later, we learned that my grandfather had been sent to one of these camps for what they called re-education. An intellectual who spent years as a teacher, as an author, needed re-education. A few months after he was released from the camps, he passed away. And we only found out through a Facebook post later on. No one was allowed to call us, and we weren't allowed to call them. We had no idea that he had passed away for 11 days until we saw that post. The last time we had spoken to him was in a rare video call when our family was able to see my grandfather, my grandmother, my aunt, and my uncle all together, looking close, but with the tension of what was happening beforehand. It was tough. We weren't allowed to ask them how they were doing. We weren't allowed to ask what was happening. It was all very orchestrated. It felt like a dance, trying to see how people were without asking how they were. And after he passed away, that became a moment for me that when I realized that this is not going to stop, that the CCP is intent on destroying the Uyghur people, and that the only way to make sure that that doesn't happen is to fight back, to stand up and become an advocate. We've heard the stories and the personal impact that this has had on Uyghurs today. We've heard why it's so important to preserve our culture, why it's so important that when our identity is threatened, when an entire group is facing an existential threat, it's so, so important for the community to come together to preserve the culture and to continue to grow and thrive and adapt in different ways. And we heard about the impact that students have, that you can have as individuals, working together and reaching beyond just your contacts and your campus, creating impact on levels that would not be possible by yourself, but are possible through collaboration, solidarity, and teamwork. It's important to remember these, because when you see all that is wrong in this world, it can be disheartening. But it's important to remember that the reason why we fight as activists, as Uyghurs, is for those personal stories. We understand the impact that it has on ourselves and on others. And we understand that there is an impact that we can have, even today. While action is slow, action is being taken. And we're seeing today the international community rising up and opening its eyes to the crisis at hand. We've seen the United States declaring a genocide. We've seen the parliaments of Canada, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom also doing the same thing. Coordinated sanctions that are targeting CCP officials responsible for the Uyghur genocide. And we're seeing growing backlash against brands that are using Uyghur forced labor across the world for their garments or for other manufacturing facilities. So while it can feel daunting to take action, it's not impossible, and your action matters. What we're doing here at Campaign for Uyghurs is empowering students, empowering youth, empowering women, and empowering Uyghurs to promote democratic rights and freedoms for our people and to put an end to the Uyghur genocide. If you want to get involved, after hearing today what people are going through, what is happening today, you can go to our website, campaignforuyghurs.org, and visit our Get Involved tab. And we have actions that you are able to take. You can write your senator or your representative if you live in the United States. You can write your member of parliament in Canada or the United Kingdom. And in addition, what we're seeing today, one of the big things is the Beijing 2022 Olympics. The Beijing 2022 Olympics is a travesty in all senses. A genocidal regime should not be allowed to host the Olympics, and to give them this torch of unity and international cooperation is a slap in the face of the victims and the survivors of the CCP's atrocities. We need to remember that. And you can take action. You can tell people about this. You can tell people about the Uyghur genocide, and you can tell your representatives that the Beijing 2022 Olympics are important, that a sign of unity and hope and peace should not be given to a genocidal regime, that this is a slap in the face of injustice. And we see today that the IOC is unwilling to listen, and we need to turn to other methods. We need to speak to our government officials and representatives and ask them to take action and do the right thing where the IOC and the CCP are unwilling to do so. You can visit berlinbeijingolympics.com for those actions. We're seeing today the start of a propaganda coup for the CCP, that they are able to take this unity, this international event, and the prestige that comes along with it, and turn it into a victory for themselves, to mask their crimes and their oppression and their authoritarianism in East Turkestan against the Uyghur people. The actions that we have on BerlinBeijingOlympics.com are twofold. You can sign a petition and put your name on the list of people who demand a diplomatic boycott and an end to the IOC's moral ambiguity, their immorality. There's also a way for you to send a letter to the foreign minister of not only your country, but to other countries in the West, such as Canada, the UK, Germany, France, and more. If we are able to raise this to their attention, if we are able to make them see exactly how many people care and why this is such an important thing, we can make a change. The world is already opening its eyes to this, and we need to show them the full extent of what is happening and why exactly it is so wrong and why exactly we need to be taking action today. So you can visit our website, campaignforuyghurs.org, and you can go to BerlinBeijingOlympics.com, and the actions that we have there are another step towards justice, peace, and freedom for the Uyghur people.
Thank you so much, Babur. For our remaining few minutes, I'd actually like to raise a few questions. So for our panelists that are on the line and want to chime in, please feel free. So as Babur just shared about this call that we should have as the international community, as citizens of humanity as well, I know that there have been a lot of questions, and all of us as activists, I'm sure, get some of these same questions from people, some of them perhaps ill-intentioned, others perhaps just a little bit unknowledgeable or naive about the situation. So I thought we might cover a couple of those in our last few minutes about why should people care? So I hear a lot of this, well, our own society has enough of its own problems, and therefore we should really focus on fixing our society before we care about what's happening in other countries or that other governments are perpetrating. Does anyone have a short, concise answer that they'd like to share tonight about your response to that? Zainab, saw your hand.
There is actually a quote from Dr. Alamke that says, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere," which I think it pretty much sums up why we should care about what is happening in East Turkestan, because it is quite an injustice. It should not be happening. And there's a lot more, but I'll leave it at that.
Great quote, classic. Anything to add from our other panelists? Sonia?
Yeah, I think one thing that's important to remember is there are intersectionalities when you look at human suffering, no matter who it is. What is happening to the Uyghur people did not happen in a vacuum. There are specific strategies that the CCP is taking that have been done elsewhere. There are strategies that they took from Nazi Germany, from the re-education schools in North America, from a lot of other areas. And it is because of the intersectionality of this issue and of human suffering and of what is happening to the Uyghurs, and specifically with the kind of weaponization of technology that's happening, it is really essential that the international community pays attention, because like we said before, like never again means never again, but unfortunately it is happening right now. And so it is really essential that the international community pays attention and is able to respond with tangible and concrete action, because this ball has to stop here with the Uyghur people. Like, this cannot happen to, like, it's happened before, but like, let's make this be the last time that this happens.
Beautiful words. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Sonia. Does any of our other panelists have anything to add on that? All right, I'd like to end with one more question, which we'll ask each one of you perhaps to contribute in 1 or 2 words. In the midst of such a dark time, I think we've touched on a little bit about where some of the hope in this darkness can be found. But I wonder if for each of you, you might share a word or 2 about something that you see happening right now that helps to propel you forward or gives you a glimpse of hope.
I would say the solidarity between the Uyghur community is something that is inspiring to me. I've become much more close with the Uyghur community as a whole, and that's something that's been amazing to see, all of us coming together for this single cause.
And I think also like the solidarity that and the engagement within the Uyghur community, I absolutely echo that. You know, like I grew up for so long feeling like I was the only Uyghur person ever in my state, but now I feel so connected. But also the kind of what gives me hope is that this community building, the solidarity building within our community, but then also with other communities. And we've been sharing this 24-hour vigil with a lot of other communities as well. Like that support and platform sharing has been so encouraging to me. There's a power in being seen, right? Even if it's something that is terrible and something that is heavy and it's like, you know, like something that I wish nobody would have to witness, if there is a comfort in being witnessed. And there's also something that's really beautiful about being able to connect to the resilience of your people and to be able to share that with others and for that to be witnessed and honored.
Akita, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I would like to say like several governments actions of acknowledging the genocides happening this year. Like right now, it's only at April. Several governments already did that. Is a huge step for recognizing our pains. And I also noticed in the past when this genocides just started, people don't usually know who is Uyghurs or what's happening to Uyghurs. But now when I told people like I am Uyghurs, they will like immediately, many people will immediately respond like saying that, well, Uyghurs, I know what's happening to you. I heard about the news, something like that. Like still many people don't know, but more and more people begins to know. So so my main point is we need to continue.
Thank you, Akita. Zainab, how about you?
I would say also like Akita, there has been, we have seen such a merging of governments recognizing the genocide, not only recognizing the genocide, but also trying to implement policies that will provide a systemic support for Uyghur individuals in the diaspora and genuinely protect them. And I think through our advocacy, not only in the US, but also around the world in Turkey, in Australia and everywhere else, we're able to continue to provide and have our governments and universities be held accountable, and seeing that universities and others as well are being held accountable and moving forward. Even the corporations, over 83 corporations, a few of those are also shifting their unethical behaviors to one that is more ethical, because they recognize that human lives are more valued and should be protected over meaningless profits.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing those thoughts. We are at the close of our time tonight, and on behalf of Campaign for Uyghurs, thank you so much for being here and having this conversation via this platform.